A woman comes near, he starts beating her up. This is Japanese men's method for dealing with feminism. Japanese feminism has already evolved from squabbling online to real-life Mortal Kombat offline. Faced with Japan's extreme feminism, Japanese men, to keep up with the new version, created the samurai duel. Put simply, there are many Japanese feminists who, for no reason at all, slander Japanese men by claiming the men molested them. So whenever a woman
just like American women do, it appears that it's everywhere that women try to slander men with false accusations.
Suddenly comes near, the man launches into a duel with her and beats her up. Because indecent assault means 3 years in prison, while a fight only means 15 days detention between 3
That's crazy. You could avoid 3 years prison by just beating them up. Oh my god.
years and 15 days. The Japanese know full well which to choose. So why did Japanese feminism reach this point? And how did men respond? Many people in the West have heard of Japan's gender opposition and the outcome in which men, as a whole, lay flat, gave up. In fact, these very same scenes, endless gender wars online, anti-marriage sentiment, mutual hatred between men and women, mass attacks on feminists and feminists striking back, are today beginning to repeat themselves in the debates of the United States and Europe. But do you know the socioeconomic reasons behind it? Japan's gender opposition must first be told starting from the Showa era, 70 years ago. Japan belongs to the East Asian cultural sphere. Before the end of World War II, Japanese women held a lowly position. After marriage, they were not allowed to work, and traditional Japanese culture already taught women to obey their husbands.
So, they got to have the housewife life, but not by choice. But I bet life was much simpler back then, much simpler.
It was only after the 1950s that the position of Japanese women began to improve somewhat. With US support for Japan after the Korean War, the Japanese economy began developing again. Society was short of labor. The idea of social equality also began to develop. Educational opportunities for women began to increase. Many famous private universities began
They let them get too smart, and then they started pushing feminism.
admitting female students, and companies began offering jobs to women. Large numbers of women were no longer content to be housewives and entered the workforce. Only with an independent economy does one gain a voice. Large numbers of Japanese women ceased to be appendages of Japanese men, and from this moment feminism began to emerge. By the 1980s, the Japanese economy began surging, to the point of boasting of buying America. In this golden age of Japan,
You can't afford America.
Japanese women's wealth also began to grow explosively, and their purchasing power leapt forward. According to figures from a certain Japanese fashion magazine, independent women in Tokyo spent about 500,000 to 700,000 yen a month taking a taxi while paying with 10,000 yen bills was just daily routine, and eating gold leaf sushi was also very common. As women's purchasing power rose, women-oriented sectors, women's clothing, cosmetics, luxury goods, beauty salons, and so on.
I mean, it sounds like they don't spend that much more than the average Californian does per month. 500,000 yen is like $3,000 a month or so. So between like 3 and 5,000 a month.
Also entered their golden age. Beyond the economic plane, more and more Japanese women began making a mark in politics. The bills and proposals put forward in the name of women's rights also multiplied. At the time, female legislators had a stable and sizable popular base and were courted from all sides. The gender equality movement was also the inevitable trend of the era. In this environment, the women's rights law duly emerged, including equal pay for equal work and a ban on employers, companies, and government bodies discriminating against women. Marriage law expanded women's rights. Before the 1980s, the crime of rape in Japan existed only in name because Japanese culture taught women to endure and swallow. Most assaulted Japanese women were forced to swallow their suffering in silence.
See, that does kind of suck because there are men who are really shitty who will do something like rape a woman. And I don't even understand, y'all, like getting off when someone is kicking and screaming and trying to push you off. How do you even keep it up? Like, that is a huge turnoff for me. And it's not something, I'm not trying to make a joke out of it. I just don't understand that mindset with those people. It's crazy. And it sucks that the women who really are raped have to suffer.
And this situation began to improve as the times moved on. In the face of sexual harassment, more and more Japanese women stood up, making the criminal Japanese men receive their due punishment. Up to this point, the Japanese feminist movement was developing well. Japanese women obtained the rights due to them and the courage to say no to oppression and injustice. Japan became a representative of developed nations not only in economy but also in culture and thought. But just as the Japanese feminist movement was gradually reaching its peak, things began gradually heading in an extreme direction. First, capital began to intervene. Capital, which had already reaped plenty of profit from the development of Japanese women's consumption, wanted to push further. So the marketing advertising of all sorts of consumer products began actively tying itself to feminist ideology. The most typical marketing case is the extension of the meaning of diamond rings and jewelry.
You know, they also tied feminist ideology to dogs, because there are a lot of batshit crazy dog girls out there with septum piercings and blue and purple hair, and I used to have an owner back a while ago like that. Thankfully, my daddy kicked her ass out of the house, because this bitch is crazy.
As the saying goes, a diamond is forever. But under the packaging of Japanese distributors, the diamond ring came to represent not only marriage, but also the urban woman's individualism and all manner of broad categories. The ring doesn't need a man to buy it for you, you can buy a ring for yourself. Likewise, all sorts of expensive luxury goods were packaged as indispensable tools for a woman to please herself. The idea that loving yourself means consuming, you are what you wear. The bag you carry began to go viral among Japanese women, which also made today's Japan a famous major nation of second-hand luxury goods.
So it's marketing and greed's fault that women have such high expectations for luxury goods and men buying them luxury goods.
Finally, capital even directly tied the material to love. Treating a woman to a meal had to be at an upscale restaurant of more than 50,000 yen, otherwise the cherry blossom lady won't give you the time of day. Not only must you go to a luxury hotel, you also had to give expensive gifts. I'm an independent, excellent Japanese woman of the new era. If you want to court me, of course you have to show sincerity. Not being willing to spend money on me means you don't like me. Spending a lot is what counts as truly loving me.
You know, that's kind of true in dog cookies, because the more cookies you give me, the better chance I will not bark at you the next time I see you. So, you know, it's always better to love with gifts, even if it's greedy.
From this was even born a special term for the phenomenon: romance capitalism. At the time, Japanese trends spread mainly through print media like fashion magazines. The magazines, upon noticing the rising trend of Japanese feminism, also actively began cooperating with capital, pouring more hedonistic values onto women. These consumption trends were labeled happy woman and happy love, which happened to suit the taste of the new Japanese women. As Japanese women's voice in the arena of public opinion grew, overcorrecting measures also began to appear. For example, extending the duration of marriage leave and maternity leave, granting women more benefits, having companies
Marriage leave? We don't get that over here.
give female employees more material benefits on holidays like Valentine's Day and Christmas and so on. But none of this was the most frightening. The most frightening thing is that, in the legal realm, Japanese judges generally began leaning toward women, especially after the crimes of rape and indecent assault returned to the Japanese public's field of view.
See, that's the problem here, is that judges, for some reason, and male and female judges, will lean in the direction of the woman, even if there isn't any real proof that it happened. And that is a big issue.
Women began ever more broadly expanding their power to define what counted as harassment. As long as a man had the slightest physical contact with a woman, it was rape or indecent assault. On the subway, as long as a man touched a woman for any reason, he'd be cursed as a chikan, trained pervert. A supervisor sending emails to a female subordinate was workplace sexual harassment. Even an office colleague. You looked at me, and I can
That's why I never hired females at my automotive business, because I was too afraid of one of the employees or something saying something wrong, or me just making a joke that was too inappropriate, and then bam, getting sued. Could not trust them. Always had male employees.
interpret that as you harboring ill intent toward me. I'm a woman. Would I, after all, joke around with my own reputation? Without anyone noticing, Japanese feminism had already begun to degenerate onto the crooked path of cursing men in every which way, treating all men as would-be rapists. Or rather, compared with the previous traditional egalitarian feminism, this voice that directly and loudly curses men is easier to spread and easier for everyone to understand. Whoever has the more extreme slogan can have more believers, and cases of expanded punishment and even slander also began to become routine in public opinion. In 1991, on a Tokyo train, a man, during the morning rush hour, accidentally touched a woman's shoulder and arm and was accused by her of sexual harassment. The man refused to settle, and the woman insisted on prosecuting. Although in the end, the sexual harassment charge was judged unfounded for a lack of evidence. After several days of litigation, the man still lost his job. At the same time, he began receiving threatening letters daily at his door, and was ultimately forced to leave Tokyo. Also in 1991, a female employee reported that a male supervisor sent her more than 5 emails a day. Although the content was all work-related, the society of the time still considered it workplace sexual harassment, which ultimately
Why are people so stupid?
forced the supervisor to resign and led to his replacement by a female supervisor. There were many similar cases, and this is also why the invention of the women-only train car did not first appear in conservative, traditional countries like those in the Middle East, but first in Japan, a developed capitalist country. The bureaucratic Japanese government at the time did not want to solve the complex social problems behind this. It merely wanted, in a purely physical way, to isolate the problem. We physically isolated it all. Now, surely you won't have any problems, right? Even so, at the time, men did generally support the establishment of these cars, because all it took was being accused by a woman of being a train pervert for the conviction rate to be 99%.
What? So if you got labeled the train pervert one day because you bumped someone, then 99% conviction rate? What the fuck?
And once convicted, losing one's job and even committing suicide was commonplace. For this reason, at the time there even existed a large number of scammers who made a profession of it, extorting large sums in settlement money. Under the stimulus of the bubble economy and complex public opinion, extreme Japanese feminism developed wildly, to the point of already beginning to guide public opinion and thought. Among these cases, the 1992 Four Boyfriends of the Heisei Woman is a typical example. This article described, in the first person, the lovely daily life of Tokyo women, and in it described the 4 boyfriends that the urban Japanese woman possessed. The so-called 4 boyfriends in fact refer to 4 types of men: the driver, the meal ticket, the ATM, and the true love.
The ATM, stupid AI voice. Anyway, we have this here, and it's called the modern woman, because they all have a mega roster anytime you're talking to a woman on a dating app.
These 4 types of men each perform their function, satisfying women's needs at every level. The driver is the man of ordinary income and ordinary looks, used to run errands and handle various chores. The meal ticket is the man of stronger economic strength, in charge of paying the bill when going to various upscale venues. The ATM is the boy in charge of giving surprise gifts on specific holidays. And the true love is in charge of romance. He can be poor, but he must be handsome. That's right, this is the Japanese woman's spiritual home. What this article wanted to convey is that having money, charm, time, and ideas could hardly all appear in a single man at once. And so the Japanese woman should find 4 boyfriends at the same time to fully satisfy her own needs and enjoy happiness to the maximum. At the time, many young Japanese women newly entering society were brainwashed by such values. They imitated the protagonist of the article, dating multiple men at once and becoming sea queens, women with many partners. Thus, the development of Japanese feminism went from initially reasonable demands gradually to the extreme and the pathological. If Japan's golden age could last forever, this beautiful dream might still hold up, but the collapse of the Japanese economy was already at the door. Behind this magical social phenomenon of Japan, the essence is still economic and social change. The development of Japanese feminism is, in essence, the dividend produced by post-war Japan's high-speed economy combined with a shortage of labor. At the time, Japanese companies' positions outnumbered the people looking for work, and they were willing to pay a high premium, even offering high salaries directly to new graduates. Only by understanding this core can you fully grasp why, upon entering the 2 lost decades or even more years, the tide of Japanese feminism receded so quickly. Because the broad economic environment changed. In the bubble era, Japanese companies could hand out a vast quantity of sky-high offers. But with the bursting of the bubble, capital began entering a winter. Even companies that didn't go bankrupt had to save themselves through mass layoffs, let alone provide positions. Since positions were limited, Japanese companies began following the law of the jungle, that is, survival of the fittest. Whoever
which will probably be the men.
Could produce more results on the limited salary stayed and was not laid off. Therefore, the Japanese women who were laid off were of two types. The first, women who enjoyed the dividend of the feminist movement, but were of ordinary or insufficient ability. They were the first to be laid off. The second, women with professional ability but not sufficiently outstanding. They were usually highly capable, but in the layoff wave, Japanese men in the workforce were more desperate than women. They not only met targets and then some, but also voluntarily took on all sorts of physical labor. Men holding several jobs at once had a natural advantage. Over time, women who had once been one-sidedly excellent were also forcibly laid off by their companies. In addition, many people say the continuing decline in Japanese women's employment rate stems from Japanese chauvinism forcing women back home. This perception.
Maybe it was just because the men were better workers. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Depending on the job, men are more fit for it, and men are more fit to be CEOs and management positions because we don't act out emotionally most of the time.
Perception is very superficial. It has nothing to do with tradition. Its core essence is the Great Involution War, Neiwan, exhausting internal competition, triggered by economic downturn. A huge number of women were squeezed out of the competition, unable to find suitable work. It's the strong devouring the weak. According to Japanese survey results, the proportion of men who, after marriage, wish for their wives to become housewives does not exceed 16% in any age group, and more than half choose to respect the wife's decision. In fact, many Japanese men do not want their wives to become housewives. Put simply, when the broad environment is bad and income falls, all that talk of tradition and isms is fake. Isn't it nicer for husband and wife to earn money together? Do you really think Japanese men can't do this math? Tradition often has little persuasive power in the face of a plate of food. After the women left the competition, the cake still wasn't enough to go around. So the portion of men who weren't so involuted also dropped out, and this is the famous Japanese lying flat. To sum up, Japan's cake shrank rapidly. Apart from a small portion of involution kings, all the rest dropped out of the competition. It is this change of era that is the true reason for the total collapse of Japanese feminism. The portion of young men who lay flat had their morale shattered. With no resources and basically no motivation, they stopped pursuing women. And after radicalizing, Japanese feminism had another big problem. It abandoned.
Yeah, why would they want to pursue these women? And I've heard the birth rates in Japan have dropped rapidly too, which maybe is because women want to advance their lives, but also I think just because men are fed up.
Abandoned its initial purpose of elevating women themselves and instead turned to firing on men, hoping men would see benefits of their own accord. So almost all its demands were built on male cooperation. I think you should respect women. I think you have to learn to empathize. I think a normal man has to better himself, has to learn to give gifts, has to learn to provide emotional value. And at this point, the answer from the lie flat crowd was no. No, I'm not a normal man, I'm just a useless wretch. Okay, done cursing me. Can I go back to lying down now? Faced with an opponent who had completely given up, who had lain flat even on his own life, extreme Japanese feminism found that any rhetoric had already lost its effect. And what about the portion of men who won the involution? Surely they wouldn't lie flat too? They say, no, I'm also not a normal man. I involuted for so many years to finally get to sit on the rooftop of a building in Ginza, Tokyo, drinking coffee. You making demands of me, please recognize the situation. The one with the right to make demands now is me, a 26.
That's true. The one who's at the top. Women are looking for that. He's the one who's going to be the high value. He should be making the demands of her.
16 questionnaire by the Meiji Yasuda
Wow.
Institute of Life and Wellness showed that men who wished to marry were only 38.7%. While women were 59%. Men in large numbers lay flat. Those who didn't were few. And women, after a round of involution in the workforce, found that in the marriage market, supply and demand had also inverted. In the end, Japanese women's marriage requirements went from the old three highs, high income, high education, good looks, to what everyone sees today. Just having a job and not committing domestic violence will do. In the anti-feminist tide of when the economic bubble burst, many women began to rehabilitate their own image, saying they had never joined the wave of female privilege. Why should they pay the price for some extremists? But unfortunately, when
I
individual
mean, isn't that what happens with women judging men? A couple of bad apples and they hate us all?
behavior rises to the social level, Japanese men habitually paste on Japanese women the label demanding, unlikable, unapproachable. When extreme feminism began trying to dominate public opinion, Japanese men no longer wanted to spend more time and money to distinguish which women were normal and which were extreme. It's like when cases of the elderly running touch and blame, scams become more and more numerous. People stop discerning whether the elderly person needs help. Everyone chooses not to help, since that's safest. Likewise, Japanese companies don't want to hire female employees, and Japanese men don't want to approach women or take responsibility for their own marriage. Because hiring a woman amounts to taking a risk. If that woman is an extreme feminist, the company or the individual will face irreparable disaster.
Exactly why I said earlier, I never hired women at my old car business.
So at this point, prudently preserving oneself became the most common way to solve the problem. Finally, after so many tumultuous years, whom did the Japanese feminist movement benefit? And whom did it harm? First, the ordinary women who did not take part in extreme feminism, who may have been very independent economically and intellectually, but who, because of the feminist movement's overcorrection and the abuse of privilege, were forced to pay the price. Second, those who advocated female privilege paid the due price for putting forward so many unreasonable demands. And more lamentably still, they, as a whole, ruined the image of Japanese women. For a certain period, they touted absurd demands, breeding in Japanese men a fear of women. Finally, Japanese men lost the desire to seek a partner.
These women, they don't realize that they are just pushing men away. They think what they're doing is helping, but really, they're just pushing it away. And then after they finally realize, oh, I can't stand doing this feminism stuff every day, where are all the men? And it's just like, hey, well, you scared them all off. There are consequences for your actions.
No longer wanted to take responsibility for marriage and love, which also gave rise to the low birth rate and the aging population crisis of today's Japan. The Japanese man began to turn into a refined egoist, refusing to take on the responsibility he ought to take. The decline of Japanese feminism thus sounded an alarm bell for the worldwide feminist movement. The essential cause of today's tragedy is not that the feminist movement was wrong. Equality between men and women. Women holding up half the sky is a normal right women should fight for. However, the spread of the feminist movement lacked an objective theoretical method, leading many women to mistakenly regard female privilege as female rights, thereby disrupting the normal feminist movement. On the other hand, the consequences of capital intervening in ideological innovation are frightening. When capital seeks to gain traffic or promote consumption, it is very easy to flatten and fog up the feminist movement, deriving from it all sorts of distorted values and consumption views. Once the contradiction rises to the social level, the side effects of extreme feminism bite even more innocent women. Every social current of thought is, in essence, a reflection of the economy. Any ism must, in the end, give a
So basically, feminism hurts everybody, even women.
material answer. Japanese men either decouple from the marriage market or lie flat, or else, after breaking free of the shackles of marriage, turn into refined egoists. Japanese women find that after noisily thrashing about with feminism for a good while, they neither won real productive power nor raised their employment competitiveness. The only use was leading everyone in cursing men. But after so many years of cursing, the other side not only didn't change, but either lay flat or became the opposition, while they themselves suffered concrete losses in the workplace and the marriage market. Why then would I still follow you? And so the once fervent Japanese feminism dissipated. Some evaluate Japanese feminism this way. In fact, the Japanese feminist movement was a success. It's just that the ones who laughed last were not women, but those hosts, male escorts, host boys, who understood the logic of feminism. The feminist tide broke the shackles of marriage and tradition, and the hosts' gains also began to increase enormously. They quickly learned the essence of that logic. Make no promises, take no responsibility, invest all their time, energy, and money in themselves, package themselves, say a few sweet words, and then begin using all sorts of pretexts to extract value from women, arguably. In the end, the true winners of Japanese society. And this is exactly why it's worth looking at Japan as a mirror of what could come to happen in the West. if the same cycle repeats itself. If you like the video, leave a like.
The problem is the same cycles always do repeat themselves, and so that's probably what's going to happen in the USA, although we have a lot of simps here, so